right. So this is our 7th session, and we're into chapter 5. So I wanted to start by recapping Karma Yoga. The chapters 3, 4, 5, actually 2 covers a lot of the Karma Yoga as well, but 3, 4, and 5. First of all, as I mentioned in the last session as well, that basically Karma Yoga goes from Arjun, who is in a more tamasic state where he doesn't want to do anything. So Sri Krishna moves him from tamas to rajas into vigorous activity, and then he wants him to transcend. So at that stage, when we are in that stage, the initial stage of Karma Yoga, we have more egocentric desires. Actions are driven by desires and ego. So then he transcends him from those ego-centered, desire-centered actions to non-egocentric actions, which are more intelligent and wise, and to use them to sort of surrender it to God, or do it for God, or do it for other people. So when we do actions which are not selfish, and we do it for other people, or we dedicate it to God as service to God, that purifies our action, and that makes our actions sacred. And this is called yajna, seva. How when we do seva, right, selfless service, that in Gita is called yajna. So when you are purified through this kind of karma yajna, then you move from rajas to more sattvic. So it gives you fulfillment, it gives you peace, tranquility, and it purifies you, right? So this is how you prepare yourself through purification of the mind. Purification of the mind is lowering your selfish desires, lowering your vasanas, and purifying your mind from these selfish, desire-based actions to more selfless actions for other people. So when you go to a more purer state of mind, then you're ready for meditation. Because if your mind is agitated, you really cannot meditate. If you have a lot of desires in your mind, you really cannot have the fruit of meditation. So this is all preparing yourself for the next stage of evolution, which is through meditation. So it's a methodology that's followed here, right? First it's desire-based actions to desire-less actions, and then you go on to pure meditation. Okay, so this is a systematic methodology for self-perfection. So now between chapters 4, the renunciation of action and knowledge, and chapter 6, which is on Dhyana Yoga, which is on meditation, there is this chapter 5, okay, which is about Sannyasa Karma Yoga, which is basically about sannyas. Now we'll get into that. But what really is sannyas Karma Yoga? What is detachment? And this knowledge is unique to the Gita. This is a step, it's an intermediate step which has been introduced in the Gita, which is not in the Vedas. Okay? So sannyas is not a physical renunciation of leaving, becoming a sage, renouncing as a swami, as you take the oath of a swami, and you have to renounce your family, your wealth, and everything. It's not about physical renunciation. It's a mental attitude of renunciation. It's an inner attitude where what happens is we detach ourselves from the outside, from the physical, from our the objects that we own, from our attachment to relationships, and so forth. So it's a mental attitude, and okay, we'll have to put everybody on mute. Okay, so this is how. Okay, that's very loud. Let me see what's going on. Everybody's on mute. Okay. So how do you attain this sannyas? This attitude of detachment is only when we transcend the likes and dislikes, when we transcend the opposites, right? The opposites always complementary. We are elated in when we gain something, whether it's money, power, wealth, and when it goes away, we are in despair. Health and sickness, all these things which are opposites, right? So when we are not swayed by these opposites, when we don't go up and down like this turbulence in the sea, you go up and down with everything happens, and you'll notice this in your life. You may think you have transcended it, but it's there all the time in your life. It's always there. Like if you just go back today and see, today, were you affected by your likes and dislikes, or by somebody else's likes and dislikes? Somebody might have said something to you and you felt something. So not being affected by the outside world and transcending that, and transcending these mental fluctuations or intellectual fluctuations, because it's the mind that experiences joy and sorrow. It's the ego that determines what it likes or what it dislikes. So when you transcend your mind and intellect, or that are driven by these opposites, that is really what is sannyasa yoga, karma yoga. So, so now just to take a step back, okay? So first is the karma yoga, where you drop the anxieties of the fruits of our actions. That's first thing, right? The second is sankhya karma yoga, which is to purify your mind from the vasanas, from the desires, and to prepare it for meditation. The samkhya yoga is knowing with wisdom that you are not the doer, right? So that's renouncing your actions through wisdom. So that's the second step. Now the third step, there are only 3 types of karma yoga in the Gita, right? So first is the karma yoga, dropping the anxieties of the fruits of action. Samkhya karma yoga, which is knowing that you're not the doer, renouncing that action through knowledge, through wisdom. And this third one is sannyasa karma yoga, right? So this is what we, chapter 5 is about, and that's what we'll be talking about, right? What is detachment? Now, I'm using detachment on purpose. I'm not saying dispassion. I'm not saying any other English words. I'm using detachment for a reason, because that is something that most people can identify with. Most people can relate to. Dispassion is also an accurate word, but let me just tell you why. So, like you have a Velcro, right? You have 2 sides to a Velcro. Now, when you separate the 2 sides of the Velcro, that's literally how this happens in our psyche, this detachment. Or think of it like a sponge which is soaked in water. Now you squeeze the sponge and the water comes out. Now you have separated the water from the sponge. So what happens in most humans, what happens in our lives is that our Atma, our consciousness, the Atma, is sort of the untouched aspect, the aspect of us which is like you would say, like a cloud above the earth. They never touch the earth. They're around it, but they never touch it. So Atma is like that. It never gets involved. But because of our ignorance, we associate ourselves with the body, with the mind, and our causal body. And this ignorance attaches you to these lower identities. It's like the water getting into the sponge. Okay, so you can think of the sponge as your physical body, your mind, and your causal body. Okay, so the 3 layers. Now, when you're so deeply entrenched in there, you can never see your true self. You can never operate from the Atma. So this is the whole knowledge given here is about detachment is when you rise above it, when you see the difference and you separate yourself from those lower identities, and you can observe sort of, it's like going, when you go into a plane or you see from a cloud level, you can see the earth. Plainly you can see the earth. But it's sort of like a witnesshood. When you witness yourself, when you understand, and from that witness perspective, from the higher perspective, you see that the body, the breath, the mind, the intellect, all of these things are simply instruments through which I am operating. I meaning my Atma. Now here I'm talking about Atma. So when you have that vision, when you have that experience, Atma Darshan, when you have that experiential state, at that point you have removed yourself. It's like the water removing itself from the sponge. Now you can see it clearly. So that is what is sannyas, meaning you are not attached to the instruments, where you can clearly see that the spirit, the Atma, is simply using these instruments to function in the physical plane. Okay, so so when we are in that state, right? Why is it important? It's important because then we are not affected. So what gets affected? See, our body gets affected, our mind gets affected, our emotions get affected, our intellect gets affected. We go through these opposites of joy and sorrow. We get hurt, we get sad, we get angry. But we really do not want to be affected. Truly, we want to be in bliss. So that is why it is very important to know who you truly are. Because when you realize that you're not these things, you're not the mind, you're simply using the mind to function, then you will not be affected by what the mind does. Okay? So you will see that these instruments, I'm calling it instruments because this is what the Gita is saying. So it's like the Atma is like the cloud, right? The cloud layer or this parallel layer, right? That is unaffected, untouched. It's separate. It's not doing. So the Atma doesn't really do anything, you know. It's a difficult concept to understand. See, it's like, it's like energy. Okay, so like you have electricity. Now electricity is flowing and then it lights up a bulb. You can't really see the electricity. You see the bulb light up, right? So like that, so consciousness, or the Atma, which is synonymous with Brahman, it is sort of like energy, even though it is not energy, it creates energy. But think of it like energy, right? It's a potentiality that has this sort of Shakti, it has this ability to create this illusion. Okay, so it's like when you see your reflection in the water, right? It creates this illusion separate from itself. It's not within itself. It creates this illusion like a projection, this Maya. Okay, so this potentiality, this energy creates this illusion, which includes nature, right? You guys can hear me, right? Okay. Yeah, so let me just explain this concept. It's a little difficult, but you must understand it. So, see, this potentiality, this Brahman or Atma, creates this illusion, Maya or Avidya, and that creates nature. So, nature meaning the outside nature, creation, as well as the body, mind, intellect, ego. Okay. So it creates this illusion creates nature, and this energy creates it. This potentiality becomes dynamic, kinetic. It takes form, shape, and all of that stuff. Now when you create that, that has its own function. It'll, all these different functions that happen when you create something. Now it's functioning on its own. It has different functions that it does. But the Atma is not doing it. It has created nature, and nature has these certain functions that will happen. Okay, it has certain cycles, it'll happen, certain physics laws that will happen, certain digestive things that will happen. It has created it, and that is functioning. So Atma is not doing, it is not acting, it is the transcendental, it is the untouched, it's the void, it's the potentiality, it's the abstract. It has simply created this whole drama. Okay, so when you understand this and when you witness it, when you experience it, you will transcend duality. Okay, you will transcend this identity, false identity that you are this body and mind and all of that. You will realize that you are much, much bigger than that. Okay, so I just happened to be talking to somebody yesterday, and I wrote this to her, and after that, when I was reflecting, it's so appropriate for chapter 5, and this is what I told her, that all of our work is for others, right? And so when everything that we do, if we dedicate it to other people, then everything is just simply happening through us. Okay, and then we are simply instruments. We are like puppets of this Atma, this body, the mind. So we're just instruments of the divine. We become instruments of the divine when we become servants for everybody, for the whole world, servants to other people. We are here to serve others, and when that happens, there's a force that is coming through us from a higher source, and it's flowing through us, as spirit. And that is like this wind that is blowing through a hollow bamboo of a flute. And then you realize that the mind, the intellect, the breath, the voice, body, they're all like instruments of that divine spirit that is flowing through you. And then there is no sense of me or I or mine. It just becomes a flow. Everything is just happens. It's a divine play. And you feel that force, the divine force just flowing through you, and things are happening through you. Through you meaning through your mind, through your body and everything, and it's flowing from this higher source, and you simply become hollow and empty, and you become an instrument of the divine. You can say Atma, Brahma. And that point, your ego has been exterminated. Then you don't have any sense of, I or me or mine. You have simply become this beautiful, blissful consciousness that is flowing through the instrument of the intellect. It uses the intellect to serve. It uses the mind to serve. It uses the body and the breath and the voice. And everything simply gets used to the best of its ability to come and serve other people. And this is exactly what saints do, right? So these saints, they're like the sun, right? They shine equally on everybody, and they are here to serve other people. They have transcended duality, they have transcended the ego, and their only function here is to serve and love everybody, right? And so our life and our human body, we have taken this incarnation simply to purify ourselves, purify our vasanas, our limitations, our impurities, our ego, and to rise to that level that you have seen personified by these saints. These saints who are living examples of what the Gita is talking about. And when you reach that state, of bliss, that is when you become unaffected by everything. Everything is happening, but you're not affected. And that is why it is said they become like the fully blossomed lotus. Because what happens in the lotus? It is, if you put water on it, it simply flows over it untouched. That is why the lotus symbolization is used, because the water doesn't get absorbed in it. It simply rolls off its petals. And the lotus grows in muddy waters. And even though it grows in muddy waters, it rises above that muddy waters and it blossoms. So that's the symbolization used in this chapter also of the lotus. The other thing that you must realize is that it's not that enlightenment has to be achieved. Okay? You are already enlightened. It is simply the covering of the ignorance by which you do not realize the Atma that you are within. It is not that you need to attain Atma. It is what you are. It is what you have to remove, the obstacles in the way by which you have to realize that you are Atma. So this is what this chapter talks about, and then there are many verses here which you should read, the beautiful verses that described a fully enlightened person. And when you read that, the benefit of reading the description, the virtues, of these saints, a fully enlightened yogi, is when you read that same thing is kindled within you. When you read certain things, it is an experience that happens within you. It's a realization within you. It's a catalyst for that realization. So when you read it, it might trigger that deeper, a deeper knowing, a deeper realization, that existentiality that is within you. So read those verses like meditation. When you hear these descriptions and when you read these descriptions, use it like a guided meditation. So read these verses in this chapter and be in solitude and read it as meditation, and then you'll feel that within you as well. Okay? So I'll just go over my notes, but that's what I wanted to cover. So if you have questions, you can ask me. Mm-hmm.
So question is, what are we striving for in this life?
1 second. Sorry, Naina is asking a question. Just hold on 1 second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry, Naina?
Transcending that into sannyasa karma yoga. What exactly is a transcend?
Transcend means when you rise above something. So when I say transcend the mind, that means you rise above.
I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I cannot hear you. Can others hear?
No, I cannot.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay.
So I can hear on the phone.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm going to mute you guys 1 second. How do I mute people? Thanks. So transcend, Naina, what transcend is, so Naina asked a question about what does transcend mean. So transcend really, dictionary meaning is really when you rise above. So see, the intellect is higher than the mind. So when I say you transcend the mind, that means you function from a level higher than the mind, where you can actually see the mind operating. Like I say, in a guidance. When I say, observe your thoughts. Okay, so how is it that you're observing your thoughts? If you are so engrossed in your thoughts, you're fully involved in the thoughts, you cannot observe the thoughts. But when you transcend, I'm going to make sure. So when you transcend your thoughts and you can observe those thoughts, right? That's when you go a level beyond your mind, above your mind, beyond your mind. It's like these concentric circles, I talked about many, I think maybe in the first session, that there's there are different layers of your existence. Like, the smallest one might be your physical body, and then it's your breath and mind and memory and ego and so forth. So as you go to the next level of your existence, you transcend the previous one. So the most difficult one is to transcend the ego, of course, right? How do few people can transcend the mind because they observe the thoughts and they come into that witness state. That's why meditation, you can observe your thoughts. But how do you actually transcend the ego? Is the only way is the experience of Atma, is when you experience your own self. And it's like it's a phenomenal experience. It's like you become a field of bliss, is how it's very hard to explain, but you can actually, you have to experience it, all I can say. But what happens is, when you, through meditation and through these practices, when you've attained a certain level of purity, then you go to a higher and higher levels of existence. You can transcend more and more and more as the purity comes about. So as you purify, you start to experience sort of higher states of consciousness or higher state of being or existence. And from that perspective, from that state, you have now transcended it. See, it's like I told you, like a sponge in water. Now, when the water is in the sponge, it's fully engrossed in there. Now, when you separate the water from the sponge, they're separate. I mean, you're not involved in that physical object anymore. When you're so engrossed in the mind and the body, you cannot transcend it. I don't know if that made sense, Naina. Yes. So how to experience transcendence, that is the methodology that we are talking about. So the entire Gita is talking about purification and clarification, purifying yourself from the vasanas and impurities and desires, and the step by step. So now we've reached chapter 5, and it's telling you how to go about and experience this state, this highest state, this transcendental state. And somebody had a question on the phone. You go ahead.
Yeah, this is Samir. So you're saying we are already enlightened and we are already pure, and so I was wondering, what are we striving for?
Yeah, no, we're not really pure. The process is purification. So we are only enlightened, meaning, it's what I mean to say is that, see, you're already Atma, okay? So it is not that you have to achieve something, to gain or become the Atma. The Atma is already there. The problem is the impurities and ignorance. So the highest, or the root cause, the main root cause, or the highest problem starts, if you remember the Tattva Bodh, the highest is the avidya, ignorance. So because of that ignorance, you start associating yourself with the lower identities, the causal, the subtle, your mental plane, and your body. And because of this ignorance, that you are now so involved in your lower identity of mind or body, or you think you're all of this, you have never witnessed, you have never experienced that state that you are Atma. The obstacles that are there for you to experience that who you truly are, is to how to transcend ignorance, is to go through the process of purification. So the purpose of this life is to attain moksha, liberation, and it's a liberation from these impurities and from ignorance. That is the whole point, is because of ignorance, which is the root cause, because of ignorance we gain impurities. If we're not ignorant, we will never gain impurities. We will be pure. But because of this root cause, we start gaining karma, we start gaining impressions, we act in the wrong way, we think in the wrong way, we feel negative emotions because of all of this ignorance. If you function from the level of the soul, you will never do anything which is not accordance with Atma. Atma will always act per dharma. It will always act in in symphony or in harmony, or it will be attuned to, or it is sort of like a dance. I don't know how to say, but the Atma will always do the right thing. You will never accumulate karma. You will never accumulate bad impressions. Nothing. It's how you would see a perfect saint in the world. So, any other questions? Because, this...
Yeah. If the purpose of the life is to attain liberation, which is moksha,
correct,
then basically we are trying to transcend from the cycles of life and death. And so the question is around the good karma and the bad karma. What I heard before was not from you, but from other places, is that when you are, the whole calculation is zeroed out, like the good karma, bad karma, there is no karma basically. When you are totally you balance it out, that's how you get liberation, I guess. Even if you are good karma, then you still have to reborn to enjoy that good karma. So is that still how you think about it? Or?
Yeah, don't bother so much about good karma or bad karma. Think of it as basically like supposing you park your car in the wrong place, you'll get a ticket, right? If you do some great thing, you might get the Nobel Peace Prize. It doesn't matter if it's good karma or bad karma. Just think of it as karma. Every karma has a consequence if it's not per dharma. So it's not that it's an account that goes to zero. It's a very simple understanding. I want you to move on from that understanding because you're learning the Gita. So fundamentally, karma is when you do not act per dharma, number one. Okay? Now, there are 3 types of karma that are listed in the Gita. One is that you should know that you are not the doer. You engage in activity, but you know that you are not the doer. That is using wisdom. You know that comes from knowing that it's simply the consciousness or your Atma that is acting through you, and it's not your mind, it's not your intellect, it's not your body or something like that. Because usually what happens is the ego thinks, I am doing this, I am doing this, I did this. And the other thing is that some people are even shy to say when they do something good, when they do something noble, even then they are shy to say that, I did this. That is also ego. That I-ness, that separation that gives you that identity has to be dropped. So you have to know that you are not the doer. That's number one. Okay? The other thing is that most of our lives we are anxious about the results of our action. We are anxious about success. We are anxious about somebody else's success. Or, we're always looking into the future as to what will happen if we do something. So when you have to drop that anxiety of the fruits of your action. You simply have to do your 100%. You do your best and drop the results of whatever it is that you will be the outcome, because the outcome does not belong to you. Only thing that you have responsibility is for your actions. And the third type of karma is the one that is in this chapter, which is with sannyas. We do it with dispassion or detachment, knowing that your body, your mind, and all of this apparatus, that is simply your soul, your atma, that is functioning through this that is happening. So this is proper karma yoga. Okay. Now, when you don't do karma yoga like this, when you are anxious about the result, when you think that I did this and I didn't do this or this thing, and when you're not detached, there will be consequences. There will be consequences. Means there will be a side effect. There will be a residue. Okay, that is called the karmic account. And that karmic account can increase or decrease depending on how you function. You know how much you can function according to karma yoga. So all these three types of karma, which are described in chapters 3, 4 and 5, the three types of karma yoga that are described, they're all per dharma. This is the natural way to act in the world. Natural meaning as per laws of nature. Laws of nature means dharma. This is the way you should function in this world. These three things. So you can make 3 points. 1, 2, 3. And if you don't function according to this, then you will have residue, you will have suffering. The whole point of life is to be liberated from suffering. Nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants anxiety. Nobody wants to have pain. You don't like to be bound. So if you don't do it this way, you will be bound. So if you want liberation, you have to follow this path.
So basically you're saying, so today, like, we as a society are not following these principles, and that's one of the reasons we are suffering. There's so much ego in everything we do.
Correct.
I.
Yes.
And living in Silicon Valley, I think it's even more pronounced here. So.
Yeah, it's like, it's here, but, until you go to some place else in the world where it may be even worse. So it's relative. But, yeah, so what has happened is over the ages are cyclical. So in this age, the dharma has fallen, Dharma meaning the practice of dharma has fallen in masses. So there's more tamas, it's a dark age. So there's more ignorance. So when there is less dharma, is like it says in the Gita, whenever the dharma drops is when that the avatar consciousness rises, because you drop to a very low stage of evolution. So this is called the Kali Yuga, and whatever. I mean, there's no proof of it, but this is what that we feel, that we are in Kali Yuga, where there is a lessening of the dharma, the practice of dharma. But you understand the 3 karma yogas because we are finishing chapter 5, so you must know the 3 types of karma yoga, just as bullet points, One is to drop the anxieties of the fruit of your action. This is actually verse number 45 in chapter 2. That you should not, your responsibility is to action only and not to the fruit of the action, and neither should you be attached to inaction. So that's one bullet point. The second bullet point is act from the wisdom, act from wisdom, from higher wisdom. Okay, that's through knowledge, through wisdom. And when you do that, you'll know that you're not the doer. That's 2. And number 3 is detach, transcend this, know that it is your Atma that is functioning through these instruments. Samnyas Karma Yoga. And so, the main thing that you must ask yourself is, how do I establish myself in the higher self, in that Brahman consciousness, in the Atma? That is the whole crux of it. How do I do that? How do I establish myself in that? Because when you experience it and when you live from there, from your Atma, your whole life will change. There's no suffering then. There is no bondage. It is, like I said, it's a beautiful stage of a flow. It's like, the wind that blows through a flute. Your Atma simply flows like a spirit flows through the body, and your intellect is used, your mind is used, your voice is used, your breath is used, your body is used simply to do the purpose of the Atma. Purpose of the Atma is always to serve others. Isn't it beautiful?
Yes.
Yeah, and so this is how it's described here in this chapter. Yeah. So, one sec, Seema, I'll repeat your question. Okay, go ahead.
Is it possible to be fully...
So Samir is asking, is it possible to remain alert and aware? Why is this happening? No. Okay, yeah. So, so Samir, Seema just asked, is it possible to stay aware and alert, basically in this enlightened state of being throughout, 24/7, right? If I could get you correctly. So yes, of course, that is a natural, that is the default state. Okay, so the sun is always there. The sun is always shining, correct? It is the clouds that cover the sun. So your body, you think of your body as earth. Okay, and think of ignorance like the clouds, and think of the sun as your Atma. Now the clouds are covering the sun most of the time. Sometimes when the clouds part, in deep meditation, you suddenly have this feeling, I just experienced a larger self, a higher state of self. But the natural state is a state without clouds. There's sun and there's earth. That is your default state. That's why this thing says it is simply a play, the whole play of creation is to create this ignorance, and then to be lost in this ignorance for a while and find your way back up. So if we did not have this whole play of Maya, of ignorance, there would be no story to tell. It is like a projection on a screen of a movie, and we are watching a movie that the Atma has produced, and it has villains and characters and blah 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 blah. Like Shakespeare said, we are all simply actors on the stage. So we meaning Brahman, the eternal consciousness, or cosmic consciousness, has created all of this, of which we are, the Atma is synonymous with it. There is no difference in that. It's just term which is different, because when you talk about the individual soul, the Jeev, so whenever I say individual soul, it means Jeev. When I say consciousness, it means Atma. I'll try to use Sanskrit as much as possible. So because Jeev is there, so therefore we say Atma. But there is no difference. It's not a separation, this is Atma and this is Brahman. Nothing like that. It is the same thing. It's called different terms. That's all. So when you're talking in relation to the microcosm, the Jeev, then you talk, say, the Atma. When you're talking on the macrocosmic level, then you say Brahman, you see. But there's no difference. But what I'm saying is this whole idea that, oh, can I really function from my Atma all the time? Yes, actually you are. And you don't know it. You cannot function without Atma. Nothing can exist without Atma. You cannot speak without Atma. You can't breathe without Atma. When you die, the body drops. The mind and the causal mind go with you. This is there later in chapter 8, and we'll talk about it later. Okay, it comes in the Gita. So it talks about the process of death, chapter 8. But your body drops, and it systematically tells you first this goes, then this goes, and how your the individual soul, the Jeev, then transcends this body, and that Jeev stays with the subtle, the physical drops, but the mind, the impressions and the causal stay with you. And not everything of the mind, certain things of the mind stay, certain levels of the mind will stay, and the causal will stay with you always till the Jeev exists. When the Jeev merges into the Atma, it's gone. But you migrate, you migrate from one to, so it is not possible for you to exist without Atma. It is Atma that is functioning through the body. You simply don't experience it from that level. So supposing we are 7 concentric circles, okay? So we are 7 concentric circles, those circles are always there. We are simply functioning from the intellect level, for example, or for the mind level. Some people are not even feeling us. They cannot even feel, So what I'm saying is those concentric circles are always there. Our awareness or our evolution is from a lower concentric, the inner concentric circle. It is that when you expand, when your awareness goes to a higher and bigger level, as you purify, as the sattva increases and all of that thing, and the way that is why next chapter will be about meditation. So the highest path is knowledge. The highest path is knowledge. Yeah, so, one sec, I'll put you on mute. So Sameer's on the phone, so I have to repeat this. So, and I can't take out my headset because then I lose my voice on the internet. So she's just asking how basically do we operate in society where we have to use our ego and our mind and so forth, but not to use the ego in a selfish way. So, okay, the best way I can tell you how to do that is to look at a role model that you have in a more enlightened person, okay, like a guru or a saint, any saint, doesn't matter. Look at their lives, whether it's an existing living saint or a non-living saint, and see how they operated in the world. That is the best way that I can tell you how to do it, because I can go on and on and on describing it, but you have to see an example of it in your life. And that is why these examples come to us. You have to see it in a person who is executing it. How is this done? It is so because for us it seems almost impossible where we are at. Only when we see a person living it, it becomes real, achievable.
one question.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing is knowledge, you said, but knowledge in itself is not enough, because you have to then bring it into your behavior, your conduct, how you conduct yourself, because that's how you're using the knowledge in reality, because there are a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge, but if it doesn't show up in the behavior, how, like I think, like Gandhiji said, right? So the character of a person you can judge based on how he treats the lowest of the lowest. So I think from that perspective, you can talk about all the discourses that somebody knows about, is well read, but if it doesn't show, that doesn't show up in the behavior, then it's not complete, I guess. It doesn't mean much. Is that
absolutely?
how you think of
Yeah.
it?
So when I see, there is inner knowledge, the knowledge of your true self. So knowledge of knowing what is the nature of your Atma, who are you, right? That is inner knowledge. And knowledge, when we go to the chapters on knowledge, it describes all the virtues that you need to practice in the outside world. So there's knowledge for the outside world, which is really virtues. And there's knowledge for the inner self, which is knowledge of your Atma. So the chapters 13 to 18, which are the knowledge chapters, which are the Upanishadic chapters, knowledge is described in terms of virtues. Okay? So even actually in chapter 12, in the chapter on devotion, there's a whole list of virtues, that you're friendly to all, you love all, this and this and this. Many, I don't remember, 24 or 32 virtues. So knowledge does not mean simply intellectual knowledge, academic knowledge, theoretical knowledge. Knowledge does not mean what you speak. Knowledge means practice virtues on the outside and experience the nature of yourself inside. That is knowledge. So it is nothing. So it's like, you go to class to first learn the nature of your Atma is, so that before you go into the lab and do it, you need to know the theory of it, but you have to go to the lab and do it. So it is okay, you learn the nature of the self, but you don't keep preaching it or talking about it or whatever. That's just a prerequisite or prep. The main thing is the experience of the self. Knowing the self, that's what I said, when you know the self, you will experience the self. When you are with a saint, or when you read the characteristics or the virtues of a saint, you will feel that within you. When you are in the company of a truly, truly compassionate being, okay, like Buddha or any great saint, Vivekananda or any of these great saints, you will actually experience what they are when you're in their company. Just like that, when you learn about what you are and when you experience it within, you will become that. You will become the Atma. That is the steps to knowledge. It's towards the end of the thing, but the end of knowledge, Advaita, Vedanta, the fruit will drop when it's ripe, correct? So the fruit of knowledge, which is liberation or moksha, will happen once you go through that process. When you go through the steps which are described in the chapters on knowledge. So it's very beautiful, it happens as the maturity happens, as the purity happens, as you start to experience yourself. There, it is like ripening of a fruit. And once the fruit is ripened, moksha will happen in a second. What takes time is the purification, is the ripening. Moksha doesn't take time. It simply happens instantaneously when you go from 99% purity to 100% purity. That's it. it takes a few seconds and you're done. But to get to 100% purity, it takes a long time. But knowledge doesn't mean scriptural knowledge, intellectual knowledge, what you preach. Knowledge means exercising the virtues of the Atma in the world. Because Atma is all love. Atma is all compassion. Atma is humility. Atma is friendliness. Atma is service. Atma is... And these are virtues of the Atma. And to practice those virtues in the world is knowledge. I hope that was helpful. Yes. Yeah, actually, that was for Shivratri. So, Seema had says, you asked us to make a list of mistakes for in one of the sessions. The reason I had asked you guys to make a list of the mistakes is because, on Shivratri, I guess all of you are Hindus, is to offer those mistakes into the fire of your soul. That is, into awareness. That is true transformation. That is what Shiva is, the principle of transformation. So, Rudra or Shiva is basically the principle which transforms, Transformation means you destroy what is not beneficial, the impurities. You destroy that and you transform it, that energy, because, energy is neither created nor destroyed. You transform that to purity. Like the yajna, it's simply when you take your mistakes and you offer it into the fire of your soul, it transforms. All the impurities are burnt. So, mistakes are nothing but your karmic account, it's the lessons that you have not learnt yet. But it's not something that you should be guilty or shameful about or anything like that, because that itself is karma, by the way. Self-guilt, self-blame, self-shame, this is all bad. They are one of the worst of emotions. We think that that is reflection. That's not reflection. Reflection is to see that ignorance did this, not the Atma. Okay? But you take those mistakes and you offer it into your awareness for examination. And when you offer it into the fire of your awareness, and when you examine it from as a third party, oh, that Vinita did this personality who is Vinita, and you observe that as a third party, you will get certain insights to it. You will get certain, aha, I understand, I realize what this is. So when you offer it into that, in that way, into your awareness, great awakenings happen, great realizations happen as to why you did it, what is the root cause. And when you know the root cause, you have 50% of the solution. And then you cannot make that mistakes again. You will not make those mistakes again. You now have removed that mistake from repeating itself and repeating itself, because the moment you learn from it, that mistake will no longer repeat. That's essentially what karma is. It repeats and repeats and repeats till you learn from it. Okay, so we are out of time.